what we want to cover today really is how we are leveraging and how we need to be leveraging the data around us, but how to do so in a manner that is operational, practical, and purposeful in order to achieve the goals that we're looking to get short-term and long-term. And I'm proud and honored to have Darren Walker speaking on this topic, because he is well-versed at addressing these issues historically well before COVID, but we know these challenges were here well before COVID as well. These are not new. I think the new piece of this is the fact that we're structurally changed now, and we have to shift our methodologies, our strategies, our approaches to these issues in order to address them. So we wanted to make it quite clear here that this conversation today is about giving you some strategies, some approaches, learning from some of the pitfalls and mistakes that we've heard, seen, or performed ourselves in this area, and try to accelerate your learning and ability to take on some of these new insights, new strategies to help you deal with the issues with workforce challenges today. So with that said, I first would like to push it to Darren and get a little idea about your background and your experiences being a chief people officer, a CHRO, as many are in this call today, and a C-suite sitting in a healthcare organization. Give me a little sense of your background in it and bring context to what we're going to be talking today.
Yeah, well, thank you, CJ, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak on this topic. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And just to give a little bit of background about myself, spent the last 20 plus years working in healthcare in various HR roles, most recently, as mentioned, as the Chief People Officer at Sanford Health, which was a 50,000 person organization that has a primary footprint in the Dakotas, but served locations in 23 different states. And had been involved in a very large transformation with that organization. When I came in 5.5, 6 years ago, it was reimagining the delivery of HR services as they were completely decentralized in many different operating units. And we built a fully integrated HR delivery system supported by technology and supported by the data that we have. And my background preceding that had done similar type of work in previous organizations, did some work with HR transformation at SCL Health, and previously more organizational transition with Providence Health on the West Coast when I was there. And really that's what I've been involved in my career is HR transformation work. And most recently in the last 5 to 7 years, it's all been about how is technology reshaping the way we deliver HR services and the data that comes from that, and how we can use that to make effective business decisions to drive better results going forward.
Well, I mean, clearly we need as much shared experiences as a collective group as we can get today. I wanted to give a little background on Laudio. For those of you who are not familiar, Laudio is an intelligent healthcare leadership solution. And we're designed specifically really for healthcare and to make it possible for these frontline leaders and leaders throughout the organization to gain better visibility of your team and to really find opportunities for meaningful connection, discover clearer paths to achieving system goals. And we've assembled the largest database in the country, I would say, of leadership actions, engagement, and workforce analytics that is all centered around these key workforce challenges. So between our data and experience, and certainly operationally with Darren, I think we can have a robust conversation here on what are the shifts happening right now. How is it different than how we operated in the past in regards to dealing with these challenges? And I'd like to start with that a little bit. If we could just set up, what are some of the key shifts that you're seeing, Darren, in regards to technology and data, how we used to use it, the frequency of that? Why don't you walk through that a little bit of how you first originally were using this and how you see it used today?
Yeah, and I've been in the business long enough that I've seen the migration from where we did everything on paper, huge file folders of employee files, recruitment files, whatever, everything was done on paper. And the inefficiencies with that, but at the time, that's all we knew, to seeing technology come about that evolved that practice into technology solutions that helped us process in the world of HR. And so applicant tracking processes, workflow process. And so we saw technology evolve into helping create process efficiency. What we're experiencing today is this huge explosion of technology that is intelligent technology. It's taking various components of different technologies, and it's compiling data and information to help you make more intelligent choices, decisions about the business. And the amount of technology that is available today is so much more significant than it was even 5 to 7 years ago. And the amount of new technology coming out every year is amazing. And with what we're seeing with AI and rapid process automation, it just continues to evolve more and more. Who would have thought, 10 years ago that robotic voice or robo call would be answering most of the questions that people have instead of a human being. And so that's the kind of thing that we're seeing and experiencing. And so how are we enhancing that to create the right experience? And then with the addition of all this technology and all the solutions that are out there, the amount of data is just overwhelming. It's coming from everywhere. So we went from an industry of 10 years ago where we were data poor and we would just scratch and claw to have any kind of data to help us out, to make some decisions, to understand and gain insights in how the business was performing. Now we've got so much, it's almost getting to the point of, okay, what do we do with all this data? How do we use it to make smart decisions? Is it telling us what we need to know, or do we just have this database of information? And so I think that's the trick, is now that we have the technology, now that we have the data coming in, how do we create a process or a workflow in which we can use it to actually help us make business decisions that drive better outcomes and results?
So let's put this into practice a little bit. We are all facing these challenges of the workforce and certainly staffing issues. We're coming through and continue to go through a period of burnout, stress, that is impacting everyone, but particularly in healthcare, given the situation. And so we're in this phase of having to really make some tough choices, because we're in what we would call a choice economy now. We've always looked at this in healthcare in regards to, hey, our patients have a choice. They can go anywhere. And so we need to make sure that we're providing the right services of quality and safety and so forth. But then from an employee perspective, now they have a strong choice as well.
Yeah.
And they're using that voice quite loudly. We're not used to having a lack of control in that situation from a healthcare perspective. And so the typical levers that we would be pulling here, and we've been applied, aren't working. Yes, certainly we need to be paying a fair wage and so forth, but that in and of itself doesn't fix the problem. Incentives, benefits, All these things are not necessarily even scalable anymore. Someone else is going to provide it next door. And so my question is, at a time that we're under-resourced, and trying to then bring more people to our system to be working, both clinically and non-clinically, and we're trying to take care of the people who are there, we're asking actually these frontline leaders to do more work, engage more with their teams, engage more in an authentic way, in a holistic manner, all these things when they're under the most stress they've ever been and understaffed. So my question is this: how are we leveraging data, and what are some of the things that you're seeing with technology that can help with that? And what are some of the things that you did structurally to help relieve, I would say, some of the administrative burden from an HR department's perspective as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I'll give the short answer first and then elaborate. But the reality is when we think about especially these frontline leaders that are under so much stress and have been under so much stress for the last couple of years, and the impacts that they're having to deal with as far as the staff turnover and dealing with temporary labor, contract labor coming in. I mean, their world has been turned upside down. The short answer is we've got to find ways to make it easier for them to be a leader. Mm-hmm. And if we aren't effective at doing that, that's when that leads to burnout, stress, frustration, and eventually turnover. So how do we do that? How do we help them be successful? And really, it's about how do we simplify the workflows that they work within with the technology. What happens is when we go out and we look at technology and we look at the solutions that it can bring, we get a false sense, and I did this as well as I was out doing the RFPs the first time I was looking at new technology. We get this sense that, oh my gosh, look at this technology and look what it can do, and it's going to do so much for us. It's going to solve so many problems for us, and it is good and it is effective. But we've got to remember that technology in of itself is a means to the end, meaning that it's a tool that can be implemented, and if implemented correctly and developed correctly, can be a great source of ease to work through workflows. But if we think technology is going to be the only solution, but implementing it's going to solve all the problems, we're going to make some serious mistakes, and we're actually going to impact our leaders in a very in a negative impact on them in a very unfortunate way. And what I mean by that is, how are we designing the workflows when we look at the technology? What is our intent of the use of the technology? What is it that we're trying to accomplish with the technology that we have? What is it that we want to do with the data that we get? How is it going to drive the business outcomes that we want? And how do we make it simple for the users to do that? I have seen, and I've talked to, and I even made some of these mistakes myself early on. When you get all this new data coming in and it flows in, and once you implement the technology, it opens up so many different windows for or for information to come in about your people and about your customers and about processes. And we just started producing reports, and we produced information and said, leader, look at this, do something with it. Here's your information. Here's your data. Here's everything you need to know. We're creating you to be a smarter leader through all this information and data that we're giving you. What we learned and what we found out was that it was so overwhelming. When the leader was receiving the information, they didn't know where to begin. And so many leaders were looking at it, appreciating the problem they had on their fingers and hands, and then sliding it to the side of their desk saying, I don't even know where to begin with this. What action should I take? What solutions is this actually bringing to my table? And so through that realization, it was identifying that we have to do something different with the data. we have to do as an HR function and as a service to the operations is, how do we create data in ways that are in bite-sized formats that actually have the analysis and done on it and actually are providing solutions to the leader so that they can take that and move forward and lead through that solution rather than turning leaders into analysts. And that's what we were doing, handing them a bunch of data and saying, look at your data, figure out your problem and do something about it. Leaders don't have the time to be analysts today. We've got them tied up in meetings. We've got them tied up rounding on employees. We've got them tied up rounding on patients. They're so stretched as it is to hand them a spreadsheet of data and say, figure this out and turn them into an analyst. They just didn't have the time or energy for that. And that's why we weren't seeing great utilization of that data. So we had to pivot. We had to make a change and learn how to create bite-sized bits of information that they could actually do something with, make it actionable, make it simple, and provide them with solutions.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, and there's a lot to unpack there. We did our own studies when we talked to a lot of these leaders, and to your point, the number one thing they said is, I don't need another system. I'm in 5 or 6 already. And, don't give me another dashboard or report. I have tons of those, really cool information. I don't know what to do with it. To your point, I don't know how to take action with this information. I don't know how to operationalize this to have impacts. And although I know there's a ton of great data around me, because we are data rich right now,
right?
Don't expect me to take the time to pull, analyze, to your point, and then figure out I don't have the time. It's not my core competency. And so as a result, one of the key shifts we're seeing with technology is making it actionable, having it such that it's being pushed to the frontline leaders in a prioritized, risk-adjusted way. So if you're going to have me focus my time on something, make sure that what I do is going to have the greatest impact on my teams towards the outcomes that matter most that we're tracking. And so this is a shift that we're absolutely seeing in the industry. We have to take that administrative burden off of these frontline leaders so they can spend more time. And so I want to talk a little bit about that shift and how we're seeing it. My question is around right where you're tailing off, the complexity of all the systems around us and all the data around us. The proper approach here is to, as we mentioned on the top of the call, simplify, simplify, simplify. What do you mean by that?
Well, really, the first thing is how are we going to structure the data? Because it's coming in from now multiple systems. It's not just one technology anymore. It's multiple technologies. So how are we going to structure it? How do we bring it together? How do we provide it in a way, as you said, in real time, on demand? And even more so, what you said was so important. How do we push it and put it in their hands? Because as you mentioned, you're right. Leaders don't have the time to go out and mine the data, find the data. They just need the data. And so we've got to find solutions to structure the data so that it can be presented in that way, real time, on demand if needed, and even more so if available, get it in their hands real time. And that means get it to them so it shows up in the morning when they log on to their computer. Is it gets sent to them to their phone, whatever it is? How do we get that information into their hands in ways that they can actually take action on the solution rather than trying to find a solution and then trying to find the actions to take? And so that's one of the key things is find structure, find a structure process. Again, aligned with that structure is, in order to structure appropriately, you have to have clear definition of your data so that everybody understands the common language that you're using within your data. That's part of creating that structure. Otherwise, you're going to get all different variations of understanding and execution, because people have different definitions based on the lenses they see through things. So that's one of the key things, is make it simple, structure it, get it in their hands real time.
Well, you know what? We talk to CNOs, CHROs, COOs every day across the country in healthcare, and this is a big topic, right? Everyone, to your point, doesn't doesn't always have the most confidence in their data. I'll say, depending upon where they are on their journey, and typically can see it not always as an advantage or an asset, but a barrier potentially. So curious, I'd like to take a poll for those who are on right now. We'll have it put up and find out, what is the biggest barrier in your mind of becoming a data-driven organization? And just curious what we see, because certainly what we hear out there, here, yeah, we got people coming in now.
Yeah. And if there's something that's not on the list, throw it in the chat so we can see that.
Please
as well.
Please do. So we're seeing it's interesting. It's all coming in pretty scattered. There's not any one compelling, but a lot of it is alignment. There's no doubt. Alignment with the executive team, and I think what's interesting is we're seeing it's almost an even split. There's only one person who says they don't have any barriers. I think that's great. Not a surprise. And we see a lot who are talking about competing priorities, I would say, is coming up there right now, as well as believing they are lacking the right technology and tools. And I think that's a really interesting place because of what Darren and I, in our past conversations. Let's talk a little bit about that one area, lacking the right tools or technology right now. Darren, I've heard you say in the past, we need to be able to take the technology, the data that we have today, and use it differently.
Yeah,
we have to look at it differently. And so I think we can bring some confidence to those on today of saying, you probably are better off than you think you are. And from a perspective of keeping it simple, how would you explain, where should you start? I know you said certainly have a plan and a vision, but how would you use certain pieces of your technology today differently than you did in the past?
Yeah, it goes back to that. Have a plan and a vision for what you want the technology to do. The biggest challenge I hear from people is they go out, they invest in technology, sometimes new technology, sometimes their existing technology, and they configure, they implement, and they say, it's not working like we thought it would. It's not producing the outcomes that we thought. And generally, when you go into the whys, almost always what you find out is we took new technology, upgraded technology, and we tried to develop our current processes or old processes in this new technology. And when we do that, we're actually working against the functionality or the intent of what this technology is supposed to do. And so if we're going to change the outcomes and we want different results than what we're getting today, when we bring in new information, new technology, we have to rework the internal operating systems that we have. Meaning that we have to think about different ways in which we get the work done. We have to think about different ways in which we engage the workforce. We have to think about different ways in which we expect the leaders to lead. Because if we take the old way of doing things and expecting a new technology to solve that problem, and we're going to get results that we don't like. And so that's when we talk about when we're looking at a transformation, a technology transformation, or becoming a data-driven organization, we've got to explore the full culture of the organization and how we operate and work as an organization. If it's part and parcel, we're not going to see the success. We will not realize the value of the technology. Interestingly enough, about a month ago, there was a report that came out, and it basically said that organizations investing in new technologies are only realizing about 35% of the value, primarily because they're bringing old process, old way of thinking, and trying to use it with new technology. And so it's not being maximized to its full extent. And that's where we miss, and that's where we get frustrated.
Well, and I think to that point, a trend that we're seeing in the market is exactly leading that way. There's a lot of great technologies out there, and we've now fragmented ourselves. So now a frontline leader, again, might have 10 different pieces of technology that for different scenarios they have to be working on, not every day, but throughout their week, their month, their year. And therefore, as a result, they're only using slices of these things.
Right.
And they don't have the time and or space to do this. So we're seeing the trend of consolidation a bit. Give someone a single pane of glass to be looking at all this information and not having to go into all these systems to then try to discover how they act upon this information. And Heidi in the chat, and thank you for putting this in, you know, it is not there's not a one size fits all. That now more than ever, it's important, as we had highlighted earlier, particularly when we're talking about workforce challenges and using technology, that you have to be authentic. You have to be personalized. You have to be meaningful and timely in your engagement. And, you know, this real-time management of data is probably at the utmost priority right now. The idea of using annual types of inputs that may be anonymous in nature, I think that's in the past now. We can't afford that timing, and we can't afford to have a lack of knowledge of how each individual is doing. And this is where we can absolutely use technology to scale that type of engagement that's needed to retain a culture, a workforce, quality and safety, and so forth. That's a massive shift today on how we're leveraging technology. So curious to hear your thoughts on real-time data and information, and you know, leveraging that in a manner right now that's you know, impactful.
Yeah, it's so true. And I appreciate Heidi's comment as well, because when we go through transformations, integrations, and implementations with technology, almost every organization has some kind of change management process in place. And which is great. I'm a big champion of change management, but in those efforts, generally we take a broad brushed approach to it because of the size and magnitude. We can't get too narrow, otherwise we're going to miss. I think what we have to do, to Heidi's point, is we have to take the macro and get the change implemented. But we also have to recognize at the frontline leader level, where am I at in my journey? We've got leaders that are in all different versions of their leadership cycle. Some are brand new into leadership. They've never had to deal with data like this. They never had to take information that they've received and do something with it. There's some that have been in the business for a long time, and there's some that have been there for decades and aren't used to using data in this way and interfacing with technology in this way. So what do we need to do is we need to be able to do just that, get down to information that is customizable to that leader's function, where they're at, and how they're performing. I'll just share one story that we went through in my previous organization. Is we went and developed this wonderful report, and it was a report that talked about incentives and premium pay. And it was something that was important to the organization because the amount of money that we were expending here, everybody wanted to see it. Everybody wanted to know what we were doing. And the intent of that report was, how do we reduce our spend here? The report was great. And in fact, it was an award-winning report from our particular vendor. And we got all kinds of accolades for it. But it didn't seem to solve all of our problems. And particularly what we were seeing, and what we had to do is get more detailed in that, because what that report was telling us is something greater than just incentives and premium pay were a problem. As we started to get more, slice the data more down to that individual frontline leader, with this particular report, what we learned is we drove it down to the facility level, then we drove it down to the department level, then we drove it down to the leader level in this particular department. And when we started looking at the data in that way and providing that information, we learned about a nurse who was working in excess of 90 hours a week, picking up additional shifts. What we also learned is the quality and the safety issues were increasing in this department because other nurses were working long hours too. Not as much as this one nurse, but still way beyond what they should be. And so what started as a very high level incentives and report, once we started drilling it down to the individual level of the leader specific to what they needed, we discovered a whole new world of information. And it caused us to change some things in that department because we couldn't have nurses putting in that kind of hours, and we couldn't have the quality and safety issues that we were experiencing. So this is just an example about how we've got to use that data in a way that gets it down into sizable information that they can use to change and be more effective in the way they lead their people. This caused a change in that leader, caused a change in the way that they structured their scheduling, who they put on, who they took off, and it also helped them develop other strategies for dealing with their safety and quality issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big advantage with regards to being able to, from a micro level, you leverage that data, not just a macro level.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because that the real change happens at the front lines.
Yes.
On the floor.
Yeah.
And so you have to have the insight and transparency and timeliness of that information in order to incrementally make those changes and adjustments. I want to share my screen real quick and show some insight here. Can you see this? It gets back to a little bit of Heidi a little bit. And it's some research that we have done at Laudio in regards to not all engagement is equal. Meaning the data that we had from across the country and what type of engagement and outreach and the impact that it has on turnover. And surprisingly enough, accountability and outreach of that was one of the highest. And things that we'd see here as celebration and recognition has impact. And the truth of the matter is, it's a calibration of all of these things that matter. It's not just one to be focused on. And so as a result of this information, we looked at this a little deeper, to your point. And we looked at birthdays and anniversaries, because obviously a lot of people celebrate those things. And we found out they only had a 7% impact on retention. Accountability was upwards of 30 or more percent.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing about this was why. And it's because it wasn't really considered a celebration or recognition from everyone. It was considered an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Everyone has a birthday or a work anniversary. I appreciate you acknowledging it, but you're not really separating me out for anything specific about me. Whereas accountability and that outreach might be addressing some challenge that's causing pain in their world. For example, I don't know, I'm clocking out late a lot. I might be thinking as a frontline leader, this is about incremental overtime or whatever it may be. But in that person's world, it might be, I'm having trouble with time management. I'm having trouble with my documentation. The person who relieves me is always late. The doctor is late on discharging the patient. We don't know what it is, but by addressing that specific issue in a timely way that's meaningful and relevant to that individual had the greatest impact, anything like that. And so having that timely, relevant, meaningful, personalized information and then prioritizing it is key here. And that's where data is powerful.
Yeah.
Is knowing when to use it. It's taking really a population health approach to your teams. Identifying the right people at the right time to engage with about the right issues that matter most. Because you can't, as a frontline leader in healthcare, who you might have 60 to call it 200 direct reports, you can't be touching them all the time, every day, 100 people or more.
Right.
But you got to touch all of them over a period of time.
That's right.
So I want to go back a little bit and go to a poll again. And would love just to hear the flip side of things from people and get a sense of what is a number one driver for becoming more of a data-driven organization. Interesting. Yeah, it's where it should be, to be very honest.
Yeah.
It is all around improving quality of care, and it's all creating personalized experiences on both sides. It's interesting when we put personalized experiences, patients and employees, you're often seeing these new roles of experience officers or whatever it may be that now straddles both patients and staff. Yeah, you're seeing it is all around those two issues.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, as we know, just from human psychology, the number one basic need is I want to be included. I want to be seen. And when you talk about using data to help that, when people say I want to be seen, they don't necessarily mean, hey, did you recognize me? They want to know, do you know me? Do you care about me? And how you show up in that is what exhibits that. You know that I've been clocking out late 5 out of my last 7 shifts. And you came and talked to me about it. And that allowed me to share with you why.
Right.
Because I'm frustrated too as an employee, because I'm getting home late to my family. I'm late picking up my kids from the daycare. And I'm not getting home in a time to join the family from dinner because I'm clocking out late because of these other factors that are impacting me getting out in a timely manner. And then that allows you as a leader to lead change so that you can get that employee out on time. You can have the conversations or improve the process or develop a workflow to help them be successful in clocking out so that they can do those things that are important to them in their personal life as well. And that's the value of this data real time is it allows people to really get to know their people in a way that they probably otherwise wouldn't. I mean, if you don't have data telling you, hey, Susie's checked out 5 times late in the last 7, you'd probably never know that, at least not immediately. And the opportunity to capture that relationship part of that conversation is gone because it's 3, 4, 5 weeks old data. And so having the data real time and at your fingertips allows you to have those in moment relationship building conversations.
Yeah, I think that coupled with we're seeing flexibility being of utmost importance,
Mhm.
and it is again back to the situation where since it is a choice economy and you have teams and staff who require now flexibility in their work and how we're leveraging technology around that as well, to find out we hear, of course, the great resignation, right? And sure, but what do I do about that? And some of the flexibility from an HR perspective, as well as from the clinical CNO side, is not being so, concrete about you're either working with us 100% of your time or you're not. You're retired or you're working with us. And
Mhm.
rather try to create some flexibility so these people can be mentors. So you don't have the brain drain of these well-experienced individuals, and let them come on working 20 hours, working whatever it is on a flex shift. So now you don't lose those people and you give them an option. We're hearing about having frontline leaders work from home once a week on the clinical
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
We're hearing the notion of trying to change and understand that, we will never have the same staffing we used to. We have to learn how to take care of patients in a different way and designate this work differently. We're hearing about some people who are saying, let's have more CNAs and nurse assistants to help shift the workload. And therefore, we have to then help nurses learn how to delegate work differently now. So I think it's a very interesting time. I think it's not any one magic wand that's going to change things here. It is all of these coupled together. But there is no doubt that it is a matter of leveraging and need to leverage technology to bring these efficiencies, lighten the workload, take the administrative burden off of these frontline leaders in order to allow them to provide the flexibility, the personalized attention, need, groom, growth. And so let's get back to the idea of simple.
Mhm.
With regards to, and Heidi brought it up as well, making it simple to do something with the information, making it simple to capture the data. How would you just start designing some of that in your architecture of putting this together? What were some of the challenges you faced when you saw it? Were you looking for one technology that had the panacea that said we could do it all? Yet we know there isn't one that exists, but the same token, you can't get the perfect solution for each thing. Otherwise, you'll end up fragmented with too many and they'll never get the use.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
your thought process behind that? How did you go through it?
Real, yeah, it really is. As we went through our journey and transformation, when the data started coming out, we had analysts looking at the data. But what we realized is the analysts we had working on the data were technology analysts. And so they were producing reports and producing solutions that were very analytical, very technical. And when we were handing those to the frontline leaders, it's like, I don't understand. I don't get this. And so what we had to do is create a small analyst group that was people oriented. And so we found analytical, HR minded people to become analysts so that when they saw the data, they could understand it from the technical standpoint. But as they went through the data and analyzed the data and developed a story of what the data is telling us, they could complete it in reports that were people centric and actually created actions for the leaders to act on that were real and simple. And that was a key change that we had to make. And so we had a group that just took the data, put it into simple terms, with the leader's mindset in mind from a people-centric, how am I going to lead my people with this information? How am I going to lead my function with this information? And that was a key in simplifying the data for them. And again, putting it in their hands and pushing it to them so that they could have it to make that. And again, putting it in small bites, small pieces, not handing them report after report and saying, okay, now do something. It was getting focused and prioritizing what is the biggest thing that we need to be working on today. And let's get focused there and let's do that. And then once we realize the value there, then we can move on to the next thing.
I think that's really, I'd love to hear from the group. Maybe we can put a question into chat, Ashley, in terms of how they would start, because this is what we're getting at right now, bite-sized, small pieces. I'd love if we could just put a question. Maybe you all can answer it in the chat. How is the data you have today impacting your organization for better or worse? And I think more importantly is, what would you start with? What are some of the initiatives that you're doing out there right now that is a shift for you all, innovative for your organizations? Would love to get your feedback on any of that as well. And Darren and I will take a look at it. And certainly, Darren was doing some interesting things even when he brought on a new HIRS. And some other technologies. You actually brought your own people in rather than hiring out. And that was a big decision for you all.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah, it was a decision of, do you bring in external partners that are going to come in for a short period of time, help you get things launched and walk out and move to the next project, versus bring in folks that we had to skill up, but would be a strategic resource for us for many years thereafter. And so, yes, we did. We made the decision not to use an implementation partner. And we went out and recruited the different elements of the team to become experts in the use of this technology. Now, at the time, it was a lot of investment up front to get them up to speed, to get them trained. But on the back end, it saved us a lot of money in implementation costs, millions. Two, whenever we had to make changes because we learned something that wasn't working, because we had the experts in-house, we didn't have to go to our vendor and get a statement of work and have their specialists come in and work with our teams and to make a simple change. We became a very agile HR operation because we were able to make real-time changes, usually within 24 to 48 hours, have those go through a change process committee and implemented in under 72 hours. And that kind of agility allowed us to be very successful, especially when the pandemic hit, because it forced us to relook at a lot of things we were doing. We changed a lot of workflows, and to be able to do that on the fly within hours was a game changer for us. And so having those in-house experts, that was a key decision for us. And again, they understood the organization. They knew what we were trying to accomplish, and they knew the vision and purpose that we had for delivering that experience. And because of that, they developed solutions and reports and technology workflows that worked for the organization.
I think what's interesting there is, and I'm seeing a little bit in the chat as well, is it gets back to what you were saying, Darren, understanding kind of the story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And having your own people well educated and informed of, here's the new technology. Let's now adopt and adapt it to who we are. How do we use it best to our advantage? And then when you look at Courtney on chat or Randall and so forth, it is, how do you communicate that story to those who were going to be asking to adopt this or for behavior change and so forth? And how do we make it such that we convey the value to them? And it's very interesting, when we were building out Laudio, that was one of the things we constantly heard. We heard always was nothing, this isn't for us. It's just one more thing for me to do. And as opposed to Laudio, which is built specifically for healthcare and built specifically for frontline leaders, and they built it. It's finally the first time they've ever had something that was built for them.
Right.
And that story is very easy to then get the adoption and understand the value there. And I think that's a key component that, healthcare is unique. And it's not, where else do you see those kind of spans of control in any other industry? 60 to 200 people, 24/7, nowhere.
Right.
Best practice in every other industry is 8. Maybe you might stretch to 12 people reporting to you.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of that, it's really important. And I appreciate, the comments in chat. It's really important to be able to communicate and educate on why this is going to make your life easier and how it's going to obviously impact your teams. And to your point earlier, Darren, most importantly, how are you going to, make this simple to achieve the goals that are important to you in real time?
Yeah, I think people are hitting it on the head. It's always start with the why, because people can quickly align to the why. They can quickly get inspired by the why. They can quickly adopt the why. Then it moves into how are we going to do it? And that's what we've been talking about for the last hour is real time, on demand, simple, bite-sized chunks. That's how we're going to do it. And then what's it going to do for us? We still have to be able to articulate the what. What are we trying to accomplish by doing it this way? I think as we look at what you have done with the Laudio technology, as HR leaders in our organizations, how do we look at that, learn from that, and say, okay, how can we create solutions real time for our frontline leaders? We always talk about being that trusted strategic partner in helping carrying out operations. This is one of the simple ways we can is help leaders be successful in leading and not handing them problems that they have to figure out. Allow them to lead through the problems, not to figure out the problems. Allow them to be the leader with their teams in solving the issues and coming and bringing the solutions to fruition rather than just giving them more issues to deal with. They don't have the time. They're exhausted. They're tired. They just want to lead. And that's what we expect them to do, is be leaders.
Well, I know we're coming to the top of the hour, and I just want to thank Darren for your insights, for your knowledge, for sharing your stories. I think the key takeaways are as follows. Regardless of what data you have areas and pockets that are absolutely leverageable. You need to do this shift into real-time information, keeping it simple, showing the value in the story, flexibility with your teams. And it is of utmost importance right now, as we know, to take away the administrative burden from these individuals. And it's these frontline leaders that are shouldering a lot of it right now. So I thank everyone for their time. And please feel free to reach out to us. I think you have all our contact information, and we'll be sending a transcript and as well as key takeaways to all of you, just so you have it in summary as well. So be safe out there, and appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.